And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how Holy Paladin feels and how it performs, goddamn! You do need the talents, gear, corruptions, rotation, and a lot more other things to start shocking your allies back into the game. So we will cover all of the basics and fundamentals your lovely face needs for Holy Paladin in 8.3. Let's kick it off with a short heads up. The guide will focus on the Glimmer build. Currently, the Glimmer build is so good that you really are doing a disservice to yourself and your group if you play otherwise. Plus, it might be going away in Shadowlands, so, now's the time. The standard build is still good, especially if you don't push high-end content. We will mention it briefly, but won't be a focus for the video. On the first row, take Crusader's Might. This is mandatory, and for better or worse, a lot of options when building your Holy Pally will be mandatory. Crusader's Might will make your Crusader Strike reduce the cooldown on your Shock and Light of Dawn. You don't want to waste its potential, so always look at the remaining time before you Crusader Strike. Bestow Faith is the non-Glimmer option if you don't have the Glimmer traits. On the second row, you have some picks. Rule of Law is the usual raid option. Your mastery makes your heals stronger the closer you are to your target. In raids, people have the tendency to spread to better deal with mechanics, and sometimes you might just have the range group away because of a specific tactic. Rule of Law balances that by increasing the range at which your heals are effective. Unbreakable Spirit will usually be your Mythic Plus option since spread groups are not an issue here. Plus, the fights are more fast-paced and the rate at which shit can hit the fan is way higher, making defensive cooldowns more important and as such efficient to have their cooldowns reduced. Cavalier is a mobility option, giving you another pony charge. You have to sacrifice a lot of power, both healing-wise and defensive-wise, to get this, so we only recommend taking it if you are 100% sure it will give you more benefits than the other two. For the third row, you have some crowd control options. Fist of Justice will give you more frequent stuns from your Hammer of Justice. This and essentially all options here really only affect your Mythic Plus performance, and maybe one or two raid bosses that have CCable ads. Blinding Light is another good example, really good in dungeons where you can stop multiple casts at once. There are mobs that channel shit that cannot be interrupted, and if you need more than one at a time, this is a lot of value. And of course, both of these are good ways to deal with things from beyond. Repentance is more of a PvP talent. Fourth row. Alright, we have to talk about this. Devotion Aura, please. I have seen a lot of people have Mercy on, and it looks better on the meters but does not help as much as Devotion Aura does. Think about it. Devotion prevents damage by, giving damage reduction and effectively increases the HP of your group. It doesn't show on the meters, yeah, but in terms of raw numbers, maths, and reasons why I failed multiple scholarships, it provides more overall. Plus, as a healer, it's always better to prevent damage than to heal it efficiently. Just, my advice. Level 75 has all options viable, but they perform differently. Holy Avenger is the best option here, specifically for high-end dungeons, and the Glimmer build that's good in both raids and dungeons. Having this baby will give you a better response rate since you can rotate between Avenging Wrath and Holy Avenger cooldowns, if shitty situations happen too fast. Judgment of Light can be good in raids for the non-Glimmer build, and it's the most mana efficient option, which the Glimmer doesn't suffer from anyway. The level 90 row gives you Sanctified Wrath. This increases the duration of your Avenging Wrath, which is a prime focus of your burst healing, and as a consequence provides the most damage as well, which is the theme of the spec and the expansion for that matter, where pretty much all healers are expected to heal damage in some way at the high end. Avenging Crusader is the non-Glimmer option and giving the build its name as well. Lastly, you get Divine Purpose for the Glimmer build. It complements the build the most and is the best performing option in a lot of situations, both raiding and dungeons. Alternatively, in dungeons you can still go Beacon of Virtue, which mechanically is the Mythic Plus ideal choice even with the Glimmer build, and maybe a better option overall, if you are not that inclined to rely on the RNG nature of the reset from Divine Purpose. Beacon of Faith is the recommended option for the Avenging Crusader build in raids. In our past Holy Paladin guides, we talked about both the builds that we are showcasing here, but we know it can be tricky to start healing with the Glimmer build without Glimmer traits, which is why we decided to mention the non-Glimmer, aka the Avenging Crusader build options as well. Crusader Strike, Holy Shock, and Light of Dawn are pretty much your bread and butter for the Glimmer build, and they all have their cooldowns reduced by haste and affected by how often you can Crusader Strike on top of all of that. So, haste will be your #1 stat, followed closely by mastery, crit, and versatility, with intellect pretty down the list. If you are playing the Avenging Crusader build, crit will skyrocket in the #1 spot. With that in mind, the consumables should be pretty straightforward. You want a Cord of Haste and Quicksand Spindles for your ring enchants, and sockets and quick navigation for your weapon enchant. These will give you the bulk of your haste that you need for the spec, because haste is good. Moving on, Greater Flask of Endless Fathoms and Superior Battle Potion of Intellect will supply your alchemical needs. You could always have some potions of replenishment, but realistically, won't need any for the Glimmer build. Crusader Strike is free, and you will be spamming it a lot and to get more shocks out and Lights of Dawns out. As for the food, the baked potato will be your ideal option. Swapping all of these with crit and intellect counterparts will round up your consumable needs for the Avenging Crusader build until you can get all of the gear you need for Glimmer. And speaking of the devil, yes, Glimmer of Light stacked 3 times will be your #1 priority. Glimmer of Light, since we have been ranting about it, if you don't know, it's a little buff you place on targets that you use Holy Shock on. When you Holy Shock, all targets with Glimmer on will be healed if they are friendlies or damaged otherwise. This is the core of your playstyle and will make it necessary for you to track the glimmers on people, but alas, you can only have 8, so not too much to track there. Another almost mandatory trait is Light's Decree. This is a red trait, but will still give you the 5 extra seconds of Avenging Wrath, which is really important because it synergizes with Sanctified Wrath, meaning you actually get 6.5 seconds, and that can make the difference between potentially giving you 1 extra Holy Shock or not, through the graces of them scaling off each other, for a total of 31.5 seconds of wings, man. Whew. Heart of Darkness is a very solid trait that will drop from the raid as right, and the raw stats it gives can be an easy filler. The issue is that the later stages of the raid drop the higher eye level as right, and those pieces have Heart and Glimmer on the same row, so Avenger's Might is a very strong alternative to have, considering Mastery is your second best stat. The sheer amount of Mastery it gives looks pretty stupid, and the fact that the Mastery buff is applied when wings proc from Vision of Perfection makes this an even better trait, you know, double dipping. Yes, you will be using Vision, but now we're talking about traits, so focus! If you are struggling with people all over the place, Breaking Dawn is good to have once for the extra range on Light of Dawn. It usually performs better with unorganized groups and with bosses that forces people away from each other like N'Zoth. And speaking of essences, you really want Vision of Perfection Major. For everything we talked about regarding Glimmer, this is by far the best option, even with its randomness baked in. There are of course other options to go for, both for Glimmer and the Avenging Crusader, but neither are as optimal as this and give you as much bang for your buck. As for minors, it can differ a bit if you are running dungeons or raids. In raids, you want stuff like Conflict and Strife, Well of Existence, and Unwavering Ward. These will work in almost all raid scenarios, especially the last 2. You can replace them, however, with Spirit of Preservation and Ever-Rising Tide in keys where the combat is high octane, especially if you are pugging and people are disorganized. I know some of you just want to do Mythic keys, I get it, but the raid though, man, the raid gives some awesome trinkets this season. Humming Black Dragon Scale and Vita Charge Status Shard are the best haste options in the game, and everybody and their mom wants them, so it should be fairly easy to find a group that's doing Rathian and Raden. Other options you can aim for are the Forbidden Obsidian Claw. This has a built-in effect that deals pretty good damage and returns mana. I mentioned before that mana isn't a big issue for Holy, at least not as much as it is for other healers. It can be an issue, and by using this you essentially save a lot of mana potions and such, making it easier to just use DPS potions or simply save the gold. Lastly, Alchemist Stone is always a very solid pick for most healers, usually starting out until you get the better options. It's craftable, so the RNG component of you getting it is practically zero. Other trinkets are good as well, as long as they respect your stat preferences. Because Blizzard loves Paladins, and by Paladins I mostly mean Holy Paladins. Red what? Am I right?
Man, that's bullshit!
Anywho, there are 3 corruptive weapons that drop from the raid, all in different states of viability. Vor's Yokal comes with the Void Ritual Corruption that supplements you with raw stats, which is always nice. Certainly, if you don't have any other options. Shiglayos might end up being your better option. First of all, it drops at a higher eye level, but has crit mastery on it. The Infinite Stars is a relative option in terms of viability. It adds a lot of single target damage, but does nothing for your healing. The general corruption effect is dependent on your build and what your group needs, so think about it before making the choice. Marcoa is another temporary good option. The Flash of Insight effect was made for healers, but the intellect procs are not really that amazing for Holy Paladins. Again, good to have until you get a better option, which is how upgrades work, I guess. In terms of actual corruption effects, we talked about Infinite Stars and other options like Toilet Devastation, and this is in the same boat. It's nice to do a lot of damage generated randomly by the game, but you are a healer in the end. Stuff like Expedient to boost your base haste levels and your haste procs is really good. It's cheap also. Same argument for Masterful as well, especially with the Avenger's Might trait we mentioned. Usually stack corruptions end up being more easily usable and valuable for healers because of the raw throughput and their cost being almost minimal. One special mention is Ineffable Truth. This has the potential to be your best in slot corruption, and I say potential because you kind of want a few to stack to around 80% cooldown rate recovery. Yes, the percentage stacks, and you really want to stack it if possible, since it becomes better and better the more you have of it. For better or worse, Glimmer Healing is a bit more simple but fast-paced and a very reactive playstyle. You want to keep Beacon of Light on the target always, usually the tank. Use Holy Shock on cooldown, prioritizing people without the Glimmer buff, keeping in mind you can only have 8 Glimmers out. Light of Dawn should be used when multiple people need healing, also good on cooldown. Don't cap on Crusader Strike to reduce the cooldown on Shock and Dawn. But keep in mind the GCD, since if the spells have around 1.5 seconds left, you waste the cooldown reduction by striking, since you still have to wait for the global cooldown to tick. Use Holy Light for low damage intakes and Flash of Light for emergencies, particularly when you get the Infusion of Light proc. With the 2 major cooldowns you have, things can get spicy. You can essentially pair both of them up if you absolutely need incredible amounts of heals out for the next 20 or so seconds. Otherwise, you can and probably should rotate through Holy Avenger and Avenging Wrath. Holy Avenger doesn't really change your rotation by itself, but provides you with your own personal bloodlust, so don't waste the extra haste you got. Avenging Wrath does change your rotation into Holy Shock, then Crusader Strike, then Holy Shock, then Crusader Strike, while casting Light of Dawn when it's available. Complicated, I know, but make sure you have both Shock and Crusader Strike available before popping Wings. On paper, the playstyle is fairly simple and straightforward. What actually changes is your execution and mentality, since you rely on procs on you being able to melee hit the target and efficiently applying Glimmer to targets who need it. Practice makes perfect. And speaking of perfecting stuff, massive shout out to Lilith, hope I got your name right, one of the top Holy Paladins in the community who helped us by feedbacking our guide once again. Lilith, together with Palinol, write the Icy Veins and Wowhead guides for Holy Paladin respectively, and are active members of the community on the Hammer of Wrath Discord, which we advise everyone to check for more advanced tips, link down below, and different Holy Paladin builds to try. And of course, a massive shout out to our Patreons. Thank you very much for supporting us month by month. You're making this a lot easier, and you're enabling us to do better and better content coming Shadowlands as well. So thank you very much. And if you're also interested in supporting us a little bit more, check the link down below. you'll get to our Patreon page. We have a couple of goodies ready for you. Thank you very much. And also hope the video helped, and we'll see you in the next one.